Recording in progress.
That's my cue. Okay. All right. So once again, I'm going to start by thanking Labex EFL for arranging the seminar series, thanking Jonathan for hosting me, and the Birgit and Gerd Carlson Stiftelse, or Foundation, sorry, for supporting my application. So in the previous seminar, I discussed the folk linguistics of swearing, focusing on the general public's beliefs, assumptions, and attitudes about swearing, especially with regard to who should or should not swear. Metalinguistic commentary was compared to empirical evidence of swearing, and examples of swear word products were presented to illustrate how the commodification of swearing both capitalizes and perpetuates folk linguistic beliefs of swearing. And today we continue the discussion by focusing on the power of swearing. In what ways is swearing powerful, and how is power affected by variability? Swearing produces effects that are not observed in other forms of language use. As such, swearing is powerful in ways that other forms of language are not. The use of swear words generates a range of distinctive outcomes: physiological, cognitive, emotional, pain relieving, interactional, and rhetorical. However, we know that the power of swearing is not intrinsic to the swear words themselves. So what do we mean by power? And if swearing is powerful, what benefits may this power entail? So this seminar presents multidisciplinary insights on the specific effects of swearing, including emotional force and arousal, increased attention and memory, heightened autonomic activity, pain relief, increased strength and stamina, and a range of distinctive interpersonal, relational, and rhetorical outcomes. So I will admit that some of what I'm presenting today is not within my specific field of study. So there are some things I can't claim to be an expert on here. But I think it's really exciting that the topic of swearing is multidisciplinary, and we can learn so much about swearing by examining it from many different perspectives. And for me, it's extremely meaningful, and also to my collaborators, that the powerful aspects of swearing can be explored and established with a variety of scientific methods. So I have actually always argued that swearing is a marked linguistic behavior. I think it's reliably noticed, reacted to, and commented on. And further substantiating this claim is my experience with swearing as a topic that, with almost no exception, everyone has experience with and opinions on. And once people start talking about swearing, it becomes clear that there is an understanding of swearing as both good and bad. However, when I began researching swearing, I took issue with the dominant scholarly discourse that, even if it was scant back then, seemed to misrepresent swearing as categorically negative. So I'm going to start by going way back in time to the late 90s when I actually started my research, and just take a look at what I said already then. So it was 1996, and I just begun researching swearing. And I learned right away that there is one perspective on swearing, just one, namely, and that's bad. Swearing is bad, just one category. And as soon as I started observing spontaneous interaction and talking to people about swearing, I then understood there was something special and even socially advantageous about swearing. By the time I was analyzing my own data, I also understood that swearing can actually be really good and good for you. So I'm not claiming to be the first to have noticed this. And I do want to give credit to Helen Ross and Ashley Montague, who already 30 years before me understood that swearing is multifunctional. But I was among the first people to document evidence of swearing as a linguistic behavior that entails such social benefits as establishing or strengthening interpersonal relationships and signaling intimacy and solidarity. My work has since then helped to establish a wave of research focusing on the benefits of swearing. And I've also helped lead the pushback against the dominant discourse of swearing as categorically bad, and the tendency to ignore, dismiss, or degrade swearing as an object of scholarship. So what I'm showing on this slide is just a really meaningless article in a university newspaper. But for me, it was interesting to go back almost 30 years ago and see that the future of swearing research then was already on the horizon. And interestingly, the article also ends with a nod to the power of swearing, a topic that I'm now exploring together with a small team of researchers. So let's explore the power of swearing by first looking at how swearing is somewhat unique from the perspective of language and the brain. So first, let's look at some evidence from neuropsychology and brain research. And while this is still a developing area of research with regards to swearing specifically, it's suggested that swearing may be located and processed in different parts of the brain from other speech activities. The emotionality and or the catharsis associated with swearing suggests that it might activate the basal ganglia, amygdala, and other parts of the limbic system. These are deep structures in the brain that play a central role in processing memory and emotion. So evidence of swearing being preserved despite other loss of language due to aphasia is centuries old. And Paul Broca noticed this in the 1800s in a patient suffering from aphasia who could only repeat a meaningless syllable or the phrase, Sacré nom de Dieu. At about the same time as Broca, a physician in America was treating a patient who miraculously survived being impaled by a steel rod. The patient seemed to recover quite well, all things considered, but it was noticed that he was seized by fits of vulgar swearing as a new form of behavior. So again, a new form of behavior. So that is, this particular patient was never known to swear before the accident. Since the 1800s, we know more about neuropsychology and brain damage that indicates that swearing may be located and processed in different parts of the brain from other speech activities. And evidence for differential brain location and processing of swear words, and in particular, a role for the amygdala limbic system, comes from the observation that these words are often retained following language loss, such as aphasia, caused by trauma to other parts of the brain. The retention of the ability to swear, despite loss of other language faculties, may reflect a more automatic or impulsive mode of processing and expression. Coprolalia, a condition in which swearing is frequent and uncontrollable, such as that exhibited by some people who have Tourette's syndrome, also suggests that swear words may be stored and produced using different neural networks from other speech activities. Memory for swearing is typically measured by presenting participants with a range of taboo and neutral stimuli. For example, showing them written words or playing recordings. Then, at a later point in the experiment, the extent to which these different stimuli are recalled or recognized is assessed. For example, in one study, a group of university students participated in an experiment using the Stroop test. So the participants were shown a series of words in different colors and were asked to say the name of the color, not the word. Have you ever taken part in the Stroop test? It's surprisingly difficult. Normally it's done where you see a color of the card and then a color is written and you have to say the written color, not the color of the card, but you tend to want to say the color of the card. So this is just a little variation on that. So in this study, the words were
some working memory thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a conflict between the spoken and the visual.
Yeah.
Space.
So the words in this experiment were either taboo or neutral, and participants were asked to rate the words on a scale of 1 to 5. This is before the experiment, for familiarity and obscenity. So as expected, there was no difference in familiarity. Everyone was familiar with all the words that were used. But the taboo words were, of course, rated considerably more offensive. Importantly, the experiment showed that reaction times, so the time from seeing the word to stating the color of the word, were much longer for the taboo words. The quickest taboo word reaction time was still much slower than the fastest neutral word reaction time. So introducing swear words into a formal experiment context can often be experienced as distracting. This is an issue that all such experiments need to take into consideration. In this experiment, though, there was a process of habituation. So the students actually had practice in reacting and saying swear words, and still they required more reaction time for the taboo words. So furthermore, all the taboo words were more likely to be recalled than the neutral words, with the taboo word least likely to be recalled, still more likely than all of the neutral words, with the exception of church. So we could discuss, is it the phonetics of church, or is it the semantics of church? But that was the one neutral word that seemed to be more likely to be recalled than the others. But across similar studies, results of recall tasks show that swear words are remembered more easily and more consistently than other stimuli.
Is this swear words in isolation, or swear words in as part of some other patterns?
These were in isolation because they were shown one after the other, or mixed up with the neutral words. And then after, and then you have to kind of look at the word and then say the color. After that's done, they were asked, which words do you remember? And the neutral words were not as easily accessible or readily accessible.
No, just because I asked it just because there's sort of like evidence also from recall tests to people who attended, like somebody wanted a study of people's memory for departmental colloquia, and they found that people remember jokes the most. So I'm guessing that, but the jokes were partly because they were typically occurring in kind of more high emotional parts of the colloquium. So so I would assume that by the same token, I mean, of course, in such a situation, if someone starts swearing, that would be really unusual.
Yeah, that would probably be.
But in
memorable.
other circumstances, it's also kind of, so I would assume maybe there's a correlation with the emotional arousal that's associated with the swearing.
Yeah, exactly, right. And that's what we want to get at. So why do they have this emotional connection, arousal connection? And one explanation can be, and it's important to always acknowledge this in these formal contexts, is that the students who are brought in to a university, lab or something, are not used to using swear words. So it really is a very different experience for them, and it stands out as being very unusual and thus more memorable. Okay, so let me see if this is going to work. So I want to move on to showing some information about swearing and pain. So there's just a short clip of a movie, and I was told that almost everybody in France knows this movie, Le Père Noël est un ordure. You do not know, okay, but it just is a nice illustration of what the relationship is between swearing and pain. So let's see if it's going to play here.
Pourquoi est-ce que vous n'avez pas retiré les trois autres vis?
Et parce que je n'ai pas de cruciforme, sinon je devrais retirer, bien entendu. Allez-y. Voilà. Poussez bien par là. Voilà. Attention.
En fait, Pierre, tellement malade. Tellement malade. Bon, et bien maintenant, c'est la suite.
Excusez-moi, Thérèse. La douleur m'a fait dire des choses atrocement grossières que je ne pensais pas, ça va sans dire.
Oui, j'entendais bien ainsi, Pierre. Ah, c'est pas plus tôt. Je vous remercie.
Bon, c'était dit sans méchanceté, je ne connais même pas votre mère.
So hopefully you understood a little bit of that, like the pain just made me say the pain made me say these things that, he couldn't control, and he doesn't even know, her mother. Okay, so let's focus on that. Let's focus on, swearing and pain. Really fascinating, relationship here. So a series of studies by Richard Stevens and colleagues has established that swearing has hypoalgesic or pain relieving effects. So Richard and his colleagues have asked experiment participants to hold their hands in an ice water bath called a cold presser for as long as they could tolerate, while vocalizing swear words versus neutral words. Pain tolerance was measured as the length of time that the participants could keep their hand in the water. Heart rate was also monitored, and across the experiments, swearing was shown to significantly increase the participants' pain tolerance, thereby producing a demonstrable hypoalgesic effect. In addition, under the swearing condition, the participants' pain threshold, that is the point at which they reported feeling pain, increased, while pain perception, the degree to which they rated the experiment as painful, was lowered. In a later experiment, Stevens and colleagues found that the hypoalgesic effect was moderated by habituation to swearing. In other words, participants who reported swearing frequently in daily life showed less increase in pain tolerance under the swearing condition, compared with those who reported less frequent use of taboo language. So those who don't swear that often, using taboo language had a more powerful effect for them in tolerating pain and experiencing pain. So while most of this work was undertaken with English speakers and all with English first language speakers or L1 speakers, Ollie Robertson and Richard Stevens showed that Japanese speakers also extended their pain tolerance while swearing, which suggests that swearing hypalgesia, or the link between swearing and hypalgesia may be universal. So we would need to really go out and study lots of different languages to confirm that.
That's also true for love.
Yeah, I'm sure. One possible alternative explanation for the hypoalgesic effect is, as I mentioned before, distraction. That is, that participants are distracted from pain by the novelty or the shock of swearing. So Stevens and Robertson tested this hypothesis using novel swear words. So words that resemble conventional swear words in English in their lexical form, and were rated as both emotional and humorous by participants. In the cold presser experiment, however, these words, these novel swear words, did not produce a hypoalgesic effect, while conventional swear words did. So these results provide further evidence supporting an emotional arousal basis for the pain alleviation effect of swearing. In a related study, but not cold presser based, Stevens and colleagues found that strength measured by muscular performance for physical exercise tasks increased when participants repeated a swear word compared with a neutral word. In this study, however, there was no concomitant escalation in autonomic activity. So the basis for these strength gains remains unclear. The possible explanations offered by the researchers include a moderating role for the hypoalgesic effect. That is, the physical tasks were made to seem less onerous because of the swearing-induced hypoalgesia, thus allowing for increased effort. Or a generalized disinhibition effect was brought about by swearing. Despite the lack of evidence for autonomic activation, there was a consistent pattern of results demonstrating that swearing increased strength and performance relative to not swearing. And a more recent set of experiments by Stevens and his colleagues also found that repeating a swear word increased participants' physical strength, measured in grip and arm strength. The fact that this outcome has been found consistently across the studies suggests that it's a reliable effect. In the 1960s, Helen Ross and Ashley Montague distinguished between annoyance swearing and social swearing. In 2008, Timothy J. and Kristen Janshevitz drew attention to the degree of consciousness involved in these two types of swearing, noting that annoyance swearing, or what many refer to as cathartic swearing, is mostly reflexive or automatic, while social swearing is more consciously managed for interpersonal purposes. The neuropsychological features of swearing presented so far and summarized on this slide here would seem to apply more readily to cathartic swearing. Social swearing is believed to involve more higher order brain processing and to be less intrinsically emotional in nature.
Which one?
The social swearing. So not as automatic.
Social swearing being like what?
Conversational interpersonal swearing. So not out of pain or effort or anger, which is likely to bring on this kind of automatic swearing.
But what's an example of social swearing in casual?
Something like, I keep thinking about your example, like here comes the fucking bus.
Oh.
Just that you know, in normal interaction. Yeah. Okay, so let's kind of segue now to social swearing and keep probing sort of the power of swearing. In a recent case study, swearing was integrated into physical therapy for a 44-year-old woman in an 8-week program of recovery. The use of swearing in the treatment plan was and presented alongside evidence suggesting that swearing can modulate pain and improve strength. So the patient was kind of primed for swearing to be some kind of treatment. And the patient agreed to integrate swearing into treatment and estimated that her own swearing frequency was at, quote, probably like 100 times a day. So there is a bit of habituation here. She's a habitual swearer. Swearing was presented as an option before, during, and or after therapy exercises, whether this patient was on site or at home, or any time pain was experienced during treatment. The patient was asked to select a swear word to use, and she chose fuck. After the 8 weeks, the patient experienced less pain, progressing from 91% to 26% disability. So this, I think, must be attributed to the actual physical therapy, not, only or just to the swearing. But what's interesting is that the patient's post-treatment survey revealed that swearing served as a distractor, it was experienced as humorous, and was associated with other positive feelings about the treatment. Ultimately, both the physical therapist and the patient reported a great collaborative bond, scoring very high on the Helping Alliance questionnaire, which measures the strength of the therapeutic alliance between patient and therapist. So integrating swearing into the treatment allowed the patient and therapist to bond over its novelty, taboo, and humor. So this brings us to another aspect of the power of swearing, namely the interpersonal power. The only way that swearing can be psychologically or physiologically different, special, or powerful compared to other forms of language is if swearing is attributed somehow a special sociocultural status. There is nothing inherent about swear words that produces powerful effects. Swear words are learned or acquired in social context and interaction, which imbues them with sociocultural meaning. So let's just do a simple thought experiment. In life, we have topics that scare us or make us feel awe or arouse us. And this might be death and disease, could be deities or evils, could be sex in our bodies. As covered in the first seminar, these are typical taboo categories for swear words. We can think about these topics and experience strong feelings about them. And these strong feelings can be felt when we talk about these things, which is why some people say, for example, G-D instead of God, or the C word instead of cancer, which is actually a swear word in some languages. So words and the things they denote often get conflated such that the act of naming a thing is just as taboo as the thing itself. But this tendency to conflate the two means that if the word can trigger the feeling, then the feeling can trigger the word. In other words, when I talk about hell, I might feel nervous. So when I feel nervous, I may then say hell. So this is how historically we have ended up with specific categories of swear words, since what has been taboo or considered a socially precarious topic throughout history, and what remains taboo today is, among other things, of course, but religion, sex and the body, and death and disease. These categories have provided our swear words, and the social taboo is maintained, such that we associate or learn to associate strong feelings with these words. And these strong feelings then become automated through the process of cathartic swearing. But what about social swearing? How is swearing socially or interpersonally powerful? In contrast to cathartic or annoyance swearing, social swearing serves interpersonal functions, such as group bonding and impression management. Most social swearing is seen as positively charged. So building on Ross's and Montague's distinction between social and annoyance swearing, Ruth Weinrib notes that swearing may function as cathartic, social, or abusive. And while the first two functions approximate annoyance and social categories respectively, the third, abusive swearing, is negatively valenced and interpersonally oriented, having the aim of directly assaulting or offending. A slightly different taxonomy is provided by Keith Allen and Kate Burridge, who identify 4 overlapping categories of swearing: social swearing, which marks in-group solidarity; abusive swearing, which offends or insults; stylistic swearing, which makes the message more emphatic or engaging; and expletive swearing, which expresses an emotion, such as frustration, anger, or surprise. From the perspective of interpersonal pragmatics, Karen Stapleton identifies 4 generally positive purposes of everyday swearing: expressing emotion, like conveying effective responses such as joy, anger, excitement, or fear; providing humor or verbal emphasis; signaling social bonding and solidarity, like building relationships or expressing affiliation; and constructing and displaying identity. It should be noted that these interactional functions are highly context dependent, varying with, for example, the formality and purpose of the situation. Also, the demographic features of the interlocutors, individual swearing tolerance, sociocultural expectations, and perceived intentions of the swearer, as well as the medium or the channel of communication and the surrounding linguistic or discursive context. A commonly accepted purpose and perception of swearing is the display of adverse feeling by the speaker. And swearing is conventionally associated with the expression of release of negative emotions, such as anger or frustration. And this remains the primary motivation for swearing in our collective consciousness. Swearing is also an exceptionally powerful vehicle for intensifying the expression of emotion. In the interpersonal domain, this is closely related to the expression of impoliteness, hostility, offensiveness, and verbal aggression. And swearing may be used to directly insult or abuse others, or to intensify an insult. For instance, a speaker may directly address somebody in taboo terms, like fuck off, or may use a slur or an expression of disparagement to discredit another person or group. In these cases, swearing is used directly as an impoliteness strategy with a deliberate intention to cause offense to others. Even when swearing is not directly aimed at another person or group, its use is often interpreted in a more generic sense as displaying aggression. So a swear word used in anger or frustration, even if not directed at those co-present, may be felt by listeners to convey messages of aggression, hostility, or dominance. And indeed, speakers may be conscious of these messages and use them to strategic effect, even when not directing swearing at their interactional partners. From a pragmatic perspective, swear words are, in themselves, offensive. Swearing transgresses polite social norms So the very act of choosing to swear is taboo behavior. And in many situations, it's likely to cause offense. Conversational swearing is often used to manage social relations and/or social interaction. Because it is proscribed and censored in so many settings, when it is used among friends or peers, it may have connotations of camaraderie or solidarity, especially where the group faces adversity or opposition. In addition, where it is part of the normative practice of a group, swearing can function as a direct act of affiliation with the group, a way in which speakers like teenagers or co-workers or sports team members can signal their support and attachment to the group in question. Moreover, because it's not possible for most people to swear indiscriminately across all contexts, swearing often marks an informal, relaxed context wherein social bonds are strengthened and social distance is reduced. My own analysis of the English or the use of English swear words by the highly successful Swedish YouTuber PewDiePie shows that swearing may also be used to create this sort of environment and build social or parasocial relationships in online settings. Similarly, swearing may be used at the interpersonal level to signal intimacy and trust. This function again derives directly from its generally proscribed nature, the key message being that I trust you enough to swear in your presence. Because swearing is generally more proscribed for women than for men, this intimacy effect is particularly prevalent for women. In all of these examples, swearing acts as a positive politeness signal, a way of building relationships, signaling positive effect, and potentially a means of mitigating face-threatening acts. Swearing may also be used for rhetorical and stylistic purposes to enhance the effectiveness and impact of the message or the credibility of the speaker. Swearing creates emotional and physiological arousal and heightens attention and memory recall. In turn, this can bring about potent stylistic, rhetorical, and interpersonal effects. For example, swearing is a powerful means of gaining attention from listeners in both conversational and professional settings. It can be used to focus concentration and to emphasize key points or issues. This function is also important for conversational storytelling, where swearing can significantly enhance the tellability of the narrative. In the previous seminar, I discussed how the sociolinguistic markedness of swear words allows them to be commodified to sell products. Judiciously used, swearing can also increase credibility or the persuasiveness of both messages and the speakers themselves. In evaluations of constructed testimonies, it has been found that texts containing swear words were judged as more believable or persuasive than those without. And finally, swearing may be used as an identity resource to present and manage the impressions conveyed to others. At an individual level, swearing may be seen as part of somebody's personality or their personal style of communication. Swearing also indexes certain group-based identities, ranging from broad social categories such as age and gender to specific work or friendship or even practice-based communities. In this way, swearing or choosing not to swear is a means of asserting or claiming a group-based identity, which may or may not be congruent with one's own personal style. At the group level, swearing can be used by members themselves to demarcate the boundaries of in-group membership versus outsider status. For example, at work or on sports teams or even age-based groupings. So now I'd like to, after having gone through all that, just present some studies that all these claims that were included on the previous slides were based on. So we can't go through all the studies, so I'm just going to, I've selected just a few, and I'm going to very briefly run through these, but I hope that the collection is enough to impress upon you the steady stream of inquiry establishing this wave of research that highlights the benefits of swearing. So a key publication is Karen Stapleton's 2003 study on gender and swearing. And among the findings, I would draw your attention to the distribution of social and annoyance swearing with an overrepresentation of the former, showing that swearing is used to provide humor or enhance storytelling and to create emphasis. Additionally, swearing allows speakers to show intimacy and trust. Although notably, this reason for swearing was given by nearly all of the 15 females included in the study, but none of the 15 males, suggesting that swearing, at least at the time and for these subjects, was a masculine privilege. In their study, sorry?
I'm guessing that's changed to some extent, at least since that time.
You guess, I'm sorry. What did you say?
That has changed to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is 20 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So.
And I think it has. Right.
Yesterday, I think it was yesterday or something, I saw that reported something that, somebody who crossed the line in the European Athletics Championship. And as she crossed the line, she said, "Fuck me." So, you know, she was pleased with the results. So.
But just as a side note, that swearing in sports, is really interesting because there was a tennis player, an Australian tennis player who swore during something like Wimbledon, you know, one of these, really,
Last time.
but also like televised, competitions, and was fined, had to pay a fine for swearing, and argued that it was unfair because everybody understands the English swear words, but not everyone understands the swearing done by people not speaking English, so they're not getting fined. So just, I understand you were making also the point about women, men, but just
No,
about,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering what did that fucking mean? It's just
Yeah,
an exclamation or.
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah.
It's a bit-
Mhm. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that comment, "You've come a long way, baby."
Yeah.
Yeah, let's look at this one. In a study from 2006, Yehuda Baruch and Stuart Jenkins commit, to my mind, some kind of questionable moralizing in this article, but nevertheless, they find that social swearing helps to forge social bonds, create solidarity among coworkers, while annoyance swearing allows employees to relieve stress. In light of the social benefits of swearing, workplace superiors have been advised in this article to allow what the authors refer to as permissive workplaces, such that permission to swear can be seen even as a workplace benefit. In my own study, I mentioned just a second ago on the hugely popular YouTuber PewDiePie, I found that swearing is a salient feature of this speaker's discourse, serving to create a distinct persona. Swearing is furthermore deployed in a way that can be considered strategic, so as to create an informal social context and achieve social bonding, despite the one-way interaction. Notably, PewDiePie's utterly excessive use of swear words is humorous and without any indication of inhibition, which further serves to index the intimacy and informality of the parasocial relationship cultivated in the videos. And in the corner, I would just point out, this is just one video that I selected as an example on this slide to show you, it was a 14-minute video and the swearing rate was about 5 swear words per minute. And then you can see the distribution. So really over representation of the word fuck in that video. Broadcast television was long considered the last bastion of language censorship in Anglophone contexts, encapsulated by George Carlin's 7 words you can't say on television. Now, over 50 years since Carlin's observation, these 7 words, shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits, have remained robustly off limits for most network television, with the exception perhaps of shit and piss, network television, I would point out. The medium of television itself, however, has evolved considerably during this time period, with the advent of cable television, pay-per-view, and streaming services. The shift from network broadcasting supported by commercial advertisements to the paid access model has entailed an untethering of television from censorship and oversight organizations, such as the FCC in the US or Ofcom in the UK. This in turn has resulted in more television series featuring such words as shit, piss, or fuck, as well as other swear words. In a series of studies on swearing in American television series, Monica Bednarek has found that swearing can be effectively integrated into television dialogue for the purpose of characterization, for humor, as a plot device, as a catchphrase, to create realism, or to control the viewer's emotions. Swearing on television thus has benefits for the story world as well as for the television industry, allowing some series to distinguish themselves through their linguistic fingerprint. Is that a fire alarm?
I hope not. That the file.
No, it went up. Okay. Excuse the interruption there. An example of this is the American series Only Murders in the Building, now in its 4th season on Disney+. In this series, swearing is a salient feature of the dialogue, with a high overall frequency and a wide distribution across its socio-demographically diverse cast of characters of varying social distance and social status. The patterns of swearing behavior in the series' 1st season, the object of focus for this publication that I did with Karen, are notable contrast to empirical evidence of swearing in face-to-face interaction and in telecinematic dialogue, establishing swearing as a distinctive feature of the series. In our analysis, we find ample evidence that swearing provides benefits to the characters within the story world, serving affiliative and relationship-building purposes among a group of strangers. But swearing may even be seen as beneficial to the production as a whole, attracting an audience via a gimmicky exploitation of the linguistic freedoms of the streaming context, and of a range of celebrities whom viewers may delight in seeing swear. And just one more example of the benefits of swearing. In this study, Nick Wilson and Joshua Wedlock collected data from a rugby team, focusing on the use of swear words by players, the team captain, and coaches. Mapping different events before, during, and after matches, Wilson and Wedlock found that swearing occurred most often during pre-match huddles, and that swearing was used primarily by the team captain, named John, for emphasis and team building. In contrast to the coaches, who swore only seldom, serving to reflect and maintain a greater social distance between them and the players. The less frequent use of swearing among the coaches thereby allowed swearing to be deployed strategically as an effective leadership tool by the captain. So this was just a sample of studies that have established different functions of swearing and shown that swearing is not always bad, but can have distinct interpersonal benefits. As such, these studies belong to the wave of research that has explored the benefits of swearing. And as it was 30 years ago, the news that bad language may not be so bad, but may actually be good, is still quite exciting. So, boiled down to the very essence, this is a summary of just some of what we know so far about the power of swearing. My colleagues and I see the neuropsychological, cognitive, and physiological aspects of swearing as intimately linked with the sociocultural aspects. Swearing cannot have socially negative or positive effects if it doesn't also have the potential to cause psychological arousal, cognitive interference or distraction, or physiological disruption. At the same time, it's only possible for any of these to be experienced if we acquire swearing, or learn about swearing, or are exposed to swearing in a meaningful way. in social interactions, and in linguistic cultural contexts. What we don't know about the power of swearing is due to the paucity of empirical evidence for the most commonly accepted theory of aversive classical conditioning, namely, what my colleagues and I call the soap and water hypothesis. In other words, the emotional power of swearing is believed to be established in childhood through aversive classical conditioning, namely by punishment for swearing. Related to this is the theory of language embodiment, in which language is acquired in tandem with the emotion regulation system, such that swear words become negatively conditioned through being effectively associated with prohibition and punishment. In short, words can acquire emotional connotations when they're repeatedly paired with emotional responses and meanings. When a child learns to associate a particular word with emotion arousing experiences, this could be praise or punishment, that word becomes a conditioned stimulus, which will, in its own right, evoke these same experiences and meanings. Moreover, as part of this conditioned response, the child will embody physiological and behavioral responses to the word. In this way, words become linked with emotion, but how such learning or conditioning actually takes place is unknown. So I just want to take a little break here and just remember in the first seminar, when Heather said that she doesn't even like saying the word cunt. I don't know if you remember that she can kind of, I want to remember that she said she can kind of feel in her body that she does it. And that's what this embodiment is. Where does that come from? Where do we learn? How do we, develop that we have these really strong reactions? It's still quite a mystery. For obvious ethical reasons, it's difficult to conduct research with children, making it unlikely to formally observe aversive conditioning or positive reinforcement taking place in childhood. So really it can be negative or positive kind of reinforcement. So we need to find other ways to explore how these processes take place. In a study by Timothy J. and colleagues in 2006, 47 written narratives and 211 survey responses were collected, again from college students, regarding memories of punishment for swearing. The findings showed that most of the participants had received punishments for swearing when they were children and could recall these in some detail. In light of classical conditioning theories, the authors hypothesized a link between these experiences and emotional force or arousal, suggesting that punitive reactions to cursing lend curse words emotional qualities that contribute to their memorability in autobiographical narratives and laboratory research. But while the study provides valuable data on experiences for punishment for swearing, it doesn't provide empirical evidence of a link between such punishment and the effects produced by swearing in later life. It should also be noted that although the authors discuss possible interpersonal benefits to children swearing, their studies focus specifically on negative memories only. The aversive classical conditioning theory assumes that formative childhood swearing memories take place with parents or other authority figures, and that these figures usually respond with sanctions for the child's swearing behavior. However, not all caregivers will react with sanctions or disapproval. Childhood swearing experiences also extend beyond the family setting and include interactions with peers or older children whose disapproval may be more important than any aversive conditioning provided at home. But peer groups may also show approval, encouragement, or emulation of swearing, which would be expected to act as positive reinforcement rather than aversive stimulation. But there's currently no research on how such positive swearing experiences fit into the development of emotional arousal and responses to swearing later in life. So we can ask people, oh, do you have any memories of getting punished for swearing? And people can come up with maybe memories for that. But we haven't asked, do you have any memories of getting a really good response from swearing when you were a kid? Like, did you say a swear word and all your friends laughed or something? We don't know about this kind of positive reinforcement. In the 2006 study by Timothy J. and colleagues, less than half of the participants could not recall receiving punishments for swearing at all. But nearly all of the participants claimed that they did not plan on punishing their own children for swearing. So just as an aside, I think I talked about this at the previous seminar, that when I was growing up and using language as a young person in the 70s and 80s, and even in the 90s, my parents and my family, and notably my friends and I, didn't swear. And I can almost not even recall any occasions when my parents swore. But now I'm fully grown with young adult children who do swear occasionally. I don't think I've ever punished my kids for it, but we talk about swearing all the time, so it's a little bit of an unusual situation. But I mentioned that I'm still in touch with my girlfriend group from high school. They all had similar upbringings. We all had the same kind of vernacular. Swearing wasn't a big part of that vernacular at all. But now with their young adult children, they all swear. Their children swear, they swear with their children. It's a generational shift that I find just fascinating. And I would really like to understand what has happened. And I am kind of keen on looking to popular culture for explanations, but I wonder if we haven't been exposed to swearing to a much greater extent through popular culture than what we were, a generation ago, and what our parents before us were exposed to. So this major shift in swearing behavior has occurred in just one. I'm sorry, that's me. Sorry about that. Sorry for that. So the practice of punishment for swearing may be on the decline. If we think about this J study took part in 2006, these were college students. They didn't plan on punishing their children for swearing. Let's age them a little bit and maybe just this anecdotal evidence of people in my generation maybe not or being more liberal with swearing. It may be the fact that we are not punishing for swearing as much anymore. If that's the case, though, if we're not punishing for swearing, someone must be punishing for swearing, because swear words still maintain this power. So there must be some kind of aversive conditioning going on. And the question is, in what context, what kinds of families is this happening in? And again, it's this lack of diversity. We just don't know. Maybe it's this kind of white middle class are okay in liberal areas, and maybe more conservative areas, they're not. So it really requires a whole lot of empirical evidence to just find out what's going on with children and swearing, what's going on with punishment practices, if anything, and just increasing the diversity of swearing. Back to. Okay, much everyday usage of swearing does not appear to be about negative emotional expression or release. A lot of routine swearing by adults is conversational in nature. It's geared towards managing interpersonal relations and discourse processes, and it's positively valenced. But there's currently a gap in our knowledge about how and when children acquire conversational forms of swearing. I think we maybe remember ourselves, or we have observed children just like using a swear word and just kind of testing it out. But we don't know, when do they actually start using swear words in normal interaction with their peers? When do they start becoming habituated to swearing? How does that happen? It seems likely that conversational swearing is acquired later than single word or cathartic swearing, but we don't know when that takes place or even how it takes place. Do these different types of swearing produce different types of associative learning and conditioning? Does conversational swearing itself produce any kind of arousal or autonomic response like that found in laboratory studies of single word swearing stimuli. And there's also a lack of research focusing on ongoing experiences and associations with swearing, including in older childhood and throughout the formative teenage years and into adulthood. While it's likely that early associations are the strongest ones, most people's use of and relationship to swearing will change over the lifespan and in response to the reactions of others in various spheres. In order to understand this issue, we also need to understand the role of interlocutors and context in swearing memories and in the associative learning process. For example, where do most formative swearing experiences take place? What are the relationships between those present? Can associative learning take place vicariously by hearing another person swear or watching the responses of others present? And finally, finally for today, there's a lack of knowledge about the role of memory or reminiscence in generating personal meanings of swearing. How well do people remember their first encounters with swearing? Or which encounters are people likely to remember? What effect do these memories have on one's present relationship with swearing? And indeed, on the various forms of power that have been reviewed so far. Importantly, we don't know if there's a critical period for the associative learning that we're assuming shapes responses to swearing in later life. Studies on second language swearing would lend some support to the idea of a critical period, but any consideration of a critical period would also need to take account of ongoing swearing experiences throughout the lifespan. For example, in addition to early childhood experiences and formative periods, is it possible that there's also an accumulation of swearing memories around the period in adolescence known as the reminiscence bump? Experiences of swearing throughout the lifespan are likely to result in ongoing redefinitions of one's own personal relationship with swearing. And it's possible that these processes will also change the power of swearing for individuals over time. Considering the sensationalization of the benefits of swearing, which may serve to excuse, mitigate, or encourage swearing, how does swearing still retain its power? As far as I can tell, this is a function of three things. One, we have the holdouts who reject any redeeming qualities of swearing and who maintain the folk linguistic beliefs of swearing as categorically negative. I used to roll my eyes and dismiss these shunners as unevolved and incapable of understanding the nuances of swearing. But now I value them so much and have instead come to understand that the very future of swear words depends on them. I think I cannot over-dramatize their importance. The second issue is the maintenance of the power of swearing as supported by genuine bad times. Whenever someone is unequivocally angry, where there is unrest, injustice, frustration, pain, or any myriad of strongly negative feelings and experiences, we must have a language for this. However quotidian swear words may become, I believe that such occasions help them to be reinvigorated. They remind us of the actual purpose of swear words, and they can thus be re-injected with power again. And then finally, we have intra and interpersonal variability, which helps us maintain this tension and power of swearing. We are inconsistent creatures who evolve and change, and we are consistently different from enough other people that an overall consensus on swearing is unlikely. Even slight differences in the use or interpretation of swear words will create interpersonal tension that also helps to maintain the power of swearing. That is it.
Okay, yeah, thank you very, very much. Yeah, it's a very interesting start.
But I had an example that just happened to me yesterday. And I was thinking about you were biking and MA is biking. I was waiting to cross the street here in Paris, and two women crossed the street in front of me, only looking one way, and didn't see a biker coming the other way. And they took their time crossing the street, and the biker passed them and started kind of yelling, but I also think swearing because I. No, they, I don't even remember if there was a light. It was just one of these, like you can kind of go halfway through and then almost like a, it's when it was divided somehow. So we're all kind of waiting in the middle. And then it was just a bike lane that was there. But I don't remember if there was a light, like a red or green light for us. But the biker had to slow down and then really almost had to stop because they were taking such a long time and they were staggered in such a way that they blocked. And started swearing. I remember hearing like salope and maybe putain.
He was
swearing at them. And they barely noticed him. They kind of looked back, but sort of looked at each other and shrugged. And I thought, I'm thinking that they are tourists. They maybe didn't understand what he said. And I started wondering, to experience the power of swearing, how much do you need? Is it enough for him to have said his piece, to have kind of marked, get these words out and feel that power, that release of frustration through the swear words? But would it matter to him that they don't understand? How much of the power is dissipated when there's no uptake?
Yeah, good question. I don't know. It's,
And I wondered if that could be something that we could explore experimentally. Could you put people in that situation and ask them, how do you feel now that you got to say this to these people? And then if you said, now, how do you feel knowing that they didn't understand? I was really trying to figure out, is there a way we could manipulate some kind of experimental situation to find out? Are you happy? Are you satisfied with the swearing, whether they understood it or not? Or is there, oh man, they're only tourists, they didn't even.
yeah.
They didn't understand.
Yeah, no, I imagine that if like if they were deaf, let's say, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, swearing presumably is also very more multimodal, right? So it's not like you just kind of politely say, you damn women,
Yeah.
don't like yourself in the bombs. Kind of very calm. You just do it very calmly, somehow it's it doesn't have the same effect, right?
Right.
And yes, I mean,
Yeah.
I would guess that usually it's performed
Sure.
right with quite high arousal. If
Right,
it's just kind of like normal language.
Yeah.
Then normal just speech, then it's not really achieving its effect, right?
Right. Right.
Again, I mean, I guess there's
Not achieving its effect, and it probably wouldn't be even as satisfying
right.
if you were kind of forced, which is, I didn't point that out, but in the cold presser, and the pain and then the stamina experiments, the participants were not allowed to yell them out. They had to just repeat them steadily, both the swear words and the neutral words. So even then they were sort of restricted in getting them. God damn it, this is cold. They couldn't even do that. They just had to, it was kind of like timed and paced, but still the swear word had more effect
but
than the
still,
neutral word.
fuck,
Yeah,
that's still, if you, I mean, just say fuck, then that's probably not the same. There has to be some marked
yeah,
phonological
but they were just
and gestural, I guess.
Yeah. But they're sitting, they've got one hand in this bucket and they're just saying, fuck. And still that was enough to have them experience, less pain and higher threshold and experience the amount of pain as less. I mean, it's fascinating, really.
No, I think, it does strike me as being really worth trying to run some experiments with also with laughter, because it seems to me that that it really seems like a very, part of a pretty similar system. It has different, obviously some different parameters, but it seems, the very fact that quite often it's also, not entirely under control, right? It's if something like the chalk falls down, it's shit,
Yeah, that's
so,
kind of automatic,
So it's clearly, I mean, I've actually typically used those examples to show that actually language can also be not fully under control. Because people used to say, "Oh, laughter is a different system." Control, but language shares, but that's kind of slightly pointing to question that argument of mine, because it's suggesting that those cases are actually a little bit, I mean, I think there are that those cases are kind of maybe is a slightly different system in some sense. I mean, I do think language, laughter is an integrated language, but
Yeah.
and clearly these things are also integrated language, right?
Mm.
This shitty book that I'm reading now, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, that is definitely part of that noun for us, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
So, yeah.
There's a Dane who runs a fear laboratory, and they have set up a haunted house, and they have people go through the haunted house, and they'll scare them and just look at like reactions, and they talk to people after they're done. And I've been I haven't really worked out, what could be a whole project. But I've looked through some of his videos, and invariably people get a jump scare, they say shit, and then they start laughing. So it's really interesting.
No, the release,
Yeah.
that aspect of because Freud is very famous for having associated laughter with release.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, he had this whole idea that it's energy release. No, that's found that, but it's kind of the very fact that you're sort of, I mean, the word release is really very strong associated with laughter.
Yeah.
So the fact that it's also associated with this, it's really quite it's pretty suggestive.
Yeah.
So yeah, and so yeah, very intriguing.
Yeah.
I don't know if there are any questions, if May has any comments or suggestions, Gabrielle?
It's a little trickier from a distance, but sorry, I don't know. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I was just thinking, Jonathan, your experiment of putting GoPros on bikers would be really interesting. And I think one thing you could tell from that, in terms of what Kristy was saying about people's, whether it lowers their feeling of frustration. So like your biker situation that you saw the other day, if someone were to say something and get ignored, I know if it were me, I would probably then keep muttering to myself. And so you probably could get something from just having a GoPro and recording what the person is saying in what situations. So what you were, the situation you were describing with the two women who weren't reacting, I would suspect that possibly it wasn't just the release of saying the words at them, but if he got no reaction, then maybe there's something missing, and the person might then continue muttering to himself. Anyway, I think there's a lot out there that would be interesting. And then one other thing I was thinking when you were talking about the pain release thing, I know that a lot of the marathoners that I know, including myself, but I try to do it with different words, you kind of have mantras when things get tough. And sometimes the mantra would just be fuck, 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 right? As you're running through critical, whatever, the wall, whatever. So there's this mantra-like thing also about repeating something regularly, even without a big outburst. And I wonder with that pain release, the pain lowering experiments that you were talking about, that's a really interesting one too. It's an amazing topic.
Yeah, and the stamina, because Richard Stevens has also shown that you can maintain or increase your stamina. But I mean, you mentioned that you try to use other words. But what I wonder is, well, first of all, it's really meaningful that people would choose swear words to have as their mantra, to have as their go-to word to repeat, to get them through these difficult situations, these these endurance, physical endurance tests. But I also wonder, I would really love to talk to people who have that practice, to find out whether when they have used a swear word like that, if it helps recharge that swear word. So if we think that if we think that swearing is used all over the place, it's used really conversationally, and it's, there's an increased exposure to swearing, and you know, we have so many channels that we can be exposed to swearing. So more swearing, but also more exposure to swearing. We think that we might get desensitized to it, it might lose its meaning. But I argue that we have these events or activities or practices that remind us of what swearing is, and reinvigorate swearing with power. And I would be curious to know if using words in that way to help you maintain your stamina and to help you endure doesn't also help remind you of the power of swearing, if you know what I mean. But I don't know if someone who uses swearing all the time, maybe that they wouldn't choose a swear word to help them power through, because it doesn't have any meaning. So we'd have to sort of map that up, like what kind of person is using this word? What kind of person does a swear word work for in a situation like that?
Yeah.
And so when
well,
you were
one of
talking,
the-
sorry, I was
Go
thinking
ahead.
about that experiment with a physical therapist where that woman had kind of
Yeah.
self-evaluated herself as quite a big swear, right? Is 100 a day
Yeah.
stuff
100
like a
times a
lot
day.
to me. And
Yeah.
yet it still worked to help her through. But then you were also talking about how it was possibly because of the created intimacy of the setting of her
Yeah.
and the physical therapist, creating kind of a special setting. Who knows? Sorry, Jonathan,
Correct.
I interrupted you.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I was just gonna say that I wonder how, you know, what difference if it would happen if, but not that different. If one used some kind of expurgated words, you know, instead of fuck, you say fruitcake or something.
Yeah.
You know, that you're kind of supposed to, you know, these sort of words that are kind of expurgated versions of this.
Yeah.
Sugar, this kind of thing.
Yeah. Right.
So to
Right.
what extent that would make a difference in
Yeah.
this sort of experiment. Because people
Yeah.
do use them quite often, and then, I mean, this
Yeah.
situation, right, it's not making a very big effect, right, because you don't really need the shitness of shit for it to have an effect, right?
Yeah.
It's just, you know, to some extent conventional. Right?
Yes.
And actually, if you make it a bit too, if you think about it too much, then it's actually disconcerting, right?
Yeah.
So, so you actually don't want to have it,
Yeah.
you know, you actually want to be somewhat, you know, what's the word, semantic, not, what's the word, semantic blending?
Oh,
Semantic-
bleached, bleaching.
Yeah.
Bleaching.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you do want to have it sort of bleached in a way, right? Because if you make it too, if you think about it too literally, all of these, most of these cases actually, then maybe you get an effect you that might disconcert you.
Yeah.
Person, right? So it actually works because typically it's already, the shit is not denoting substance, right? So,
Yeah.
because you don't say diarrhea, right?
Yeah. No. But you're exactly right. And that's what we're just really having difficulty. We're, you know, racking our brains. How do we find out what happened in your life that allowed you to map that feeling, that emotional arousal onto that word? When did you learn it? How did you learn it? How do you know? Because you can be told, I mean, we've all learned a different language. And when we learn another language, especially after, you know, as adults, we can be told, these are the swear words. And you're like, okay, I know it, but you don't feel it. You don't feel it like you feel, or it takes you a while. And what kind of experience would you have to go through before you were to feel it? Is it just knowing these are the swear words? And after a number of years, you have internalized that and you now have feeling, or do you know, okay, these are the swear words. And then I see some guy on a bike and he says, you know, putain, salope. And I'm like, oh, okay. Do I start feeling it then? So it's great. It's one way of looking at how does this link between emotion and swearing occur when you look at second languages or later in life learned languages. But we also want to know what are kids actually going through, or young adults, adolescents.
No, No, I'm just thinking of the Greek word malakas. I don't know if you know this.
No.
Malakas means literally wanker. But Greeks use this word a lot. And to the extent that among young males, it's more or less that, you know, like, moloko, you know, you kind of, it's like almost like mate or like,
Okay.
you know, kind of, you know, bro, kind of. Moloko, you know,
Yeah.
the whole time I use it in this sort of way.
Okay, but if.
But for me, I actually do use it these days as a kind of, as a swear word, and I do, it's effective for me.
Okay,
So, you know, yeah.
but would you be able to comment on, if a young kid, a young boy said Malakas, would
Yeah.
someone say, would he get reprimanded? Would, you know, what would be your instinct?
Yeah.
Or do they laugh at it?
Right, yeah,
because that's
probably,
also
yeah,
just
it probably
important.
is kind of a common.
Yeah,
So I mean, it's true that there was recently on language blog, there was that they showed a YouTube of some young girl in North England. Like a sort of 5-minute monologue, and she was speaking in quite heavy sort of Lancashire dialect. And she was kind of cussing at this ice cream van guy who had, you know, he was overcharging or something. And so this became viral because of the, you know, she was like 6 or 7, and she was.
oh, yeah, yes, I've heard of that, I know exactly what you're talking about, yep.
Yeah. I don't think she said anything very.
But wasn't it like the price of ice cream, she couldn't
Right,
believe,
right,
yeah,
yeah.
right,
But I'm not sure what she was actually, whether she said anything. I think she must have used some kind of slightly, you know,
yeah,
derogatory language, I would say. But nothing, you know, beyond, but, you know,
okay,
it did get viral, like, exactly for this reason. That, you know, the
Yeah.
young, you know, because she was, what, 6, you're saying this?
yeah,
Or something. But I mean, people find it comical.
yeah.
So not shocking in the negative sense, just comical.
Yeah, so it makes you wonder, what kind of reactions that child has gotten such that that's a natural way of speaking now.
Yeah, but I think it's also class thing, because she's clearly working class.
Yeah.
So, you know, working class, I mean, the
Yeah.
level of swearing are higher, right?
Yeah,
Clearly.
yeah, and we don't know, we, you know, as far as I know, there is no research on, punishment practices
Mm.
from anyone beyond a very small segment of white middle class America. So that would be really interesting to know. And then you come into contrast, I mean, this is the tension that swearing thrives on, or rather needs, you know, to exist. Because you have, you know, some segment of the population with one kind of, practice, you know, a social practice for swearing, comes into contact with another. And then, you know, there is this clash. We have different, you know, practices in swearing. And that can sometimes help, like when you meet someone, who takes offense at swearing, it kind of sets you back if you're a swearer and you think, oh, I didn't realize. And so they maybe that's an experience that they need to understand that, or not that they need to understand, but that might be an experience that helps attribute some power to swearing for them.
Yeah, no, I still, even though I'm a casual swearer, I still, when my kids swear, I'm still kind of, you know, not that I do anything, not that I substance them in a kind of any serious way, but I kind of, come on, you know.
Yeah.
That's controlled, you know, when there's kind of like a torrent coming out, it's kind of like, whoa. And it's completely sort of rational, but I think it must be due to with. Because I found that it was really wrong. Again, there was no punishment, but it was just not done.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's hard to shape that. Yeah. Yeah, and it's, yeah, Heather shared with me, her book that recently came out, and I was looking at the text that she had about, you know, her informants talking about, what's bad language, in terms of, like French or Canadian French, and a couple of people said, oh, well, you shouldn't swear. I mean, some people focused on the grammar, and some people focused on swearing, so she had a section about swearing. But it's hard to shake that swear, I mean, it goes back to that dominant discourse. Swearing is bad, and you know, you just shouldn't do it. And I think and that's what I'm kind of curious about. Is this a generational thing? Are we moving out of this kind of gut reaction to swearing as no, and being more,
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I would hazard a guess that it has some Victorian kind of origins,
yeah,
but just like the sex, just like,
Yeah.
You know, sex with pleasure, so with swear, so it's.
yeah. But I always come back to, we need it. We need, some people need to retain that gut reaction. Because we'll lose them.
Right.
If no one is against swearing, then we just won't have it anymore. So who is carrying that torch? Is the question.
Yeah.
Well, think about school. I mean, in France, you'd get in big trouble if you tried to swear in school.
What if you swore in English?
No, that would also not work, as far as I know. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, French schools are very prescriptive in the way they transmit language use. So there is that. We are in a culture where you're constantly correcting other people's way of speaking. And kids then get in the habit of doing this. And so I know I was walking years ago, a friend of my son's, she must have been 6 or 7 years old, and I said something and she misinterpreted the context and she corrected the word. So I said a plural, I said something that was singular, so cheval, and she thought I should have used the plural form, and she thought I was saying the wrong plural form. Anyway, so I think there's this habit of correcting people in French. It'd be interesting to try to map this on. And so I think in the French school system, there's very much an awareness of how you're speaking. And I don't know, maybe Jonathan has different experiences of this, but I can't possibly imagine a situation where a teacher would tolerate someone swearing in a classroom setting. I don't know if that's changed in the US now. That would be interesting.
Oh, in the classroom, I don't know.
Yeah, you wouldn't imagine with
I
the new
can't
public,
imagine.
right? With a new kind of, though I guess it's complex there too. The sort of this Trumpist kind of this. It's also sort of, because of higher, because it's got a more higher arousal kind of stuff. So on the one hand, there's a kind of, I would associate no swearing with kind of, no sex before marriage.
Yeah.
But same time, we have all this kind of also Trump as a figure of very using swearing a lot, like using mocking,
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
difficult.
swearing and slurs.
But yeah,
but I have a colleague in Finland, and she's American, but her teenage daughter goes to school, goes to a Swedish school in Helsinki, and her daughter came home just very recently, before school ended, and said that her teacher at this school used an English swear word with her, just in casual conversation. So the teacher used an English swear word with this teenager with whom she normally speaks Swedish.
yeah, again, depends on what, but the shit, I mean,
Yeah.
it really depends. I think also among
think it's
I think it does matter which words, I think that there has to be some sort of, there's not a uniform, there's
No,
sort of
no.
a difference between,
Yeah,
shit and, obviously, various different kind
Yeah.
of, and whether it's being used as a drug, fucker or bitch, this kind of stuff.
yeah,
Because bitch, for instance, is now completely bleached.
yeah,
It's used all the time by young women.
yeah, right.
Even my daughter used bitch to me. As a kind of a term in the.
Yeah, but also just, I agree that there are different degrees of swear words, but the fact that the teacher, and I'm pretty sure it was fuck, I wonder, I can look in the email, because she gave it to me as sort of an example, but, just the fact that the teacher thought that was okay, you know,
So again, what the fuck as opposed to fuck that, you know? I mean, these are, and neither of them are particularly strong. Right?
no, but we're talking about. a
Yeah, I
teacher
wouldn't
to a
expect a
student.
teacher, I'd be a bit surprised if a teacher did kind of, you know, suddenly, somebody throws something from a, you know, from a upstairs story and, you know, a bag of wood, I mean, the teacher's like, you
Mm,
know, that would be a bit surprising.
yeah. Yeah. But next week is about, second language swearing, and, I think it's really interesting. I'm keeping my ears open here, and I've also, I'm gonna try to include them in the presentation, but I've seen some evidence of English language swearing here as well.
Now, people here were very, very upset with Macron when he said that, you know, during the COVID, he said, I want to, with respect to the people, the non-vaccinated people, he said, I want to MLD them.
Yeah, right,
That was,
yeah.
you know, considered to be really appropriate. So. Even though I don't think MLD is, would you describe that as swell? I mean,
No, no, I don't think that's a swear word.
but maybe just because it contained the word male inside as a morpheme, right? Then.
But did people publicly complain about that?
People thought it was kind of like, you know, it showed a certain amount of kind of, I don't know what to say, not exactly lack of class, but kind of a bit, you know, the president should be above that. He should be somehow, you know, he's the president of everybody in theory, so he should be, you know, it showed a certain lack of empathy. That was part. And I mean, he of course used it as kind of like part of his macho sort of thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, and maybe it's a little like tough times call for tough words, like maybe there was some kind of deliberate choice of that word to really, you know, provoke a reaction, or maybe not to provoke a reaction, but to indicate that he was serious. and
Yeah,
that
no,
this was,
that
this
was
was,
the
yeah,
intent, but
yeah.
as people say, you know, there are ways of doing this.
Yeah,
This is not the
okay,
way.
yeah.
So.
Mm. Mhm.
So I'll stop the recording.
Yeah, we can stop the recording.
Um,